Now, after getting my hands on the iPhone 13, there was something that I realized very early. The iPhone 13 is the iPhone 14, but at a cheaper price. Now, the iPhone 13 is a phone that I feel will suffer from not having that quote-unquote new factor. Everyone knows that the iPhone 14 is a newer phone, and despite the 13 being a cheaper phone that'll give you the exact same experience, many people will still pass on it. And during my time of using the iPhone 13, I feel like if you're someone who doesn't care to have the latest and greatest, you'll truly enjoy what it has to offer. It has a really good display that is the exact same as the new iPhone 14. It has a slightly better battery than the 14. It has a very powerful chip that still holds up extremely well after almost 2 years later. And it supports the latest version of iOS 16, so it'll give you a brand new experience. And even though the iPhone 14 is a quote unquote old phone that has a new experience, it's not perfect, and in this video, I will be giving you guys my overall experience to help you decide whether or not it's actually worth buying. Now, starting with design, the iPhone 13 has that signature look that is still implemented on the newer iPhone 14, and I really love this since it's a more updated version of the previous iPhone 12 with its smaller notch, and it also has that really boxy frame that's reminiscent of the iPhone 4S, and I really love how it has a display that we know today, so it gives it a futuristic yet minimal look. And besides the minor details implemented, the phone looks the exact same as the iPhone 14 from the power button, volume rockers and mute switch, all the way down to the speakers, lightning port, and the back. But looking at its color, the version that I have is blue, and I think that it really looks good. It has the darker matte sides along with a true blue glass back that gives it that right amount of depth and results in a really good looking device. And now looking at display, the iPhone 13 has a 6.1 inch OLED display that's just like the iPhone 14, which means that in terms of viewing experience, you're really getting a bang for your buck. Whenever I was scrolling through my phone, it looked good. Everything looked nice, the responsiveness was very precise, and I had no complaints about the overall feel, but the only problem that I had with it was the refresh rate. The 60Hz on the display was good, and even though I do wish it was 120 instead, I will say that the 60Hz on the iPhone 13 feels smooth, and I didn't really have any major complaints about it. Whenever I was scrolling through apps, you could tell the frame rate drop on some apps like Eventbrite and some others, but in most apps it was fine, so hopefully Apple can implement a higher refresh rate on base model iPhones. The bezels are extremely small. Right here, you can tell that they're wrapped nicely around the screen and are much cleaner overall. The notch is pretty small, so it's not as wide when compared to older iPhones. Now, when it comes to brightness, the iPhone 13 is at 800 to 1200 nits, which is the exact same as the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. And I'm not gonna lie, the brightness was pretty good. I live in LA, so there's much less shade, but I was still able to see everything very clearly, and using the phone whenever I was at work wasn't a problem. And now when it comes to the size of the iPhone 13, I can't say whether or not you will love it or hate it, but I do want to list some pros and cons that you can look out for. Now, the pros of having a nicely sized screen is that the viewing experience is still really good. It's easy to use compared to the 14 Pro Max, where I would struggle to reach to the top of the screen, and it fits into my pockets much easier no matter the size of my pants. And now the only con is that it's not as big as the Plus or Pro Max, so the viewing experience won't be as good, but 6.1 inches is not really small, so there really aren't any true cons. But again, I want to let you guys decide if the pros are worth the upgrade because everyone's needs are different. Now, another problem that I had with the display was the fact that Apple still hasn't added a fingerprint sensor. I think the iPhone has the best facial recognition in the game with Face ID, but it still would have been nice if having that extra way of unlocking my phone. The resolution and viewing experience of the 13's display is an amazing benefit when it comes to the viewing experience. I was able to see everything very clearly when watching videos. Playing games on it was as fun as ever, and I wanted to give you guys an idea of what it would look like when watching something and playing a game.
That's a good feed to the Bryant, and he scores on the dish from D'Angelo Russell. They're squared up to the baseline. I harp on that a lot. That's just an easy play to make.
Now, when it comes to battery, the iPhone 13 has a 3200 mAh battery that is the exact same as the iPhone 14 and was easily able to last me all day with no problem, even with heavy use. And mind you, I'm the type of person who is usually on my phone all day doing things like writing scripts, planning B-roll, shooting videos, scrolling through social media, watching YouTube videos, and texting my friends. And I'm usually getting over 6 hours of screen time a day, and I only charge my phone when I'm sleeping. I also use my 13 on power saving mode, but most of the time I did use it to the max, and it was still able to perform very well. So if you do get the 13, battery won't be an issue. And if I could give you guys a quick estimate, I would say that my battery is usually on 10% by the end of the day, and the battery had much more efficiency than my 14. And right now, my battery health is at 92%, which hopefully will keep up longer. Previous iPhones are known to have the battery life significantly drop, so hopefully the 13 breaks that streak. Now, the last thing that I wanted to touch on when it comes to battery was the charging, and if I'm being honest, The charging really isn't that great in terms of speed. It would take me well over an hour to get to 100%, but like I said before, you only need one charge since the long-lasting battery is a pretty great trade-off. And now looking at software, the iPhone 13 supports iOS 16, and just like on any other iPhone, you have the app drawer that holds and categorizes all your apps. You have the new wallpaper system that is a huge upgrade and feels much smoother on this phone, and you have many more minor things that makes the phone feel even sleeker. And even though most of the time it was sleek, there were times where it wasn't. Like there were many times where my 13 would freeze on me and I would have to restart my phone for it to correct itself. And even though it was annoying, it really didn't happen that often. But besides the frequent freezes, most of the time the software was very smooth and worked very well, just like the iPhone 14. I feel like most of you guys will realize that in terms of software, it's really not that much different from other models. And I also decided to test out some games on my 13. I play Asphalt 9, which is a game that can really test out the chip. And as you can see, it held up very well and I didn't really get any lags while playing. And now the final thing that I wanted to note is that the iPhone 13 will be getting 4 to 5 more years worth of software upgrades. So when it comes to longevity, it's definitely got you covered. Now, just like the iPhone 14, the 13 has some really loud speakers that were pretty good whenever I used them. I would usually use them in a house whenever watching videos on social media or YouTube. And I didn't have to turn it all the way up because of how loud it was on the lower tiers of volume. I tested out how they sounded when playing music. And if I'm being honest, they're loud, but the quality isn't the greatest when the volume gets to the max. And I also tested out my 13 as my alarm, and I had no problem waking up from it. I didn't have to set multiple alarms, and I didn't have to worry too much about receiving important notifications whenever I turned on my ringer. Now, the iPhone 13 has a 12 megapixel main camera, along with a 12 megapixel front and 12 megapixel ultra wide. And based on my usage over the past 2 years, I would say that the pictures still hold up very well and look really good. Now, starting with zoom modes, the iPhone 13 has a couple of different zoom modes, and of course the quality gets dumbed down a bit once you get closer, but I found all of the zoom modes to be great when compared to other smartphones. The shutter speed was very good from the start. I decided to test this out by shooting moving cars, and as you can see right here, the camera was able to capture most cars beautifully, no matter how fast they were going, so I was pretty satisfied. And now next up, I want to show you guys how the camera performed in different environments, and the first environment that I will be starting with is daytime. Now, looking at the outside photos, we can see that they have a really great shadow of depth whenever I'm taking pictures of myself along with a nice blur. And this is scaled all the way up once I use portrait mode that Apple has always been pretty good at. I also took some photos of random street objects, the sky, and different aspects of nature. And I can honestly say that the 13 held up very well in these environments, and I was really impressed. Now, taking a look at inside photos, the 13 was able to capture everything very nice. And I found the pictures to be slightly more detailed than the iPhone 12 in terms of sharpness. Even when taking selfies, you can see how the camera handles already good lighting to produce an overall nicely taken photo. My skin tone looked really good and the sharpness was at its peak. And now when it comes to shooting video, the iPhone 13 is easily one of the best older phones that you can buy in this price range. You have many different modes and frame rates to choose from, but I prefer to shoot my videos in 4K at 30 frames per second because not only does it look good, but the movements are very realistic. The video stabilization was out of this world. I shoot videos with my phone, so whenever I'm shooting my subject, I can use everything handheld, and the movements are very smooth, which was very impressive. So all in all, I would definitely say that the iPhone 13 has an amazing video camera that will give you some consistently good shots. So if you're someone who wants to shoot content or you just want a really solid camera, the iPhone 13 has definitely got you covered. Also, here's some extra videos that I was able to get. So here's the final question. Is the iPhone 13 a good phone to buy over the iPhone 14? Well, I would say that it's a really great phone, and in terms of value, it's a much better buy than the iPhone 14. It has a really nice display that is the exact same as the iPhone 14. It has a great battery life that is better than the iPhone 14. It has a great build quality that is the exact same as the iPhone 14. And as far as price, it's $100 cheaper. So in my honest opinion, it's just a much better choice. And if you are someone who does prefer the iPhone 13, it's a phone that you'll be very satisfied with. And hopefully this video helped you guys decide whether or not it's actually worth buying. But there it is, you guys, my review on the iPhone 13. And if you guys have any questions for me, you can ask them in the comment section down below. And again, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Peace.